5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Our constituents elect us to make their lives better. They send us to Washington to work on the issues that impact American families, whether it's healthcare, jobs, the cost of prescription drugs, infrastructure, clean air and water, climate rescue, and of course, safe communities and schools. But every day in Congress, we are seeing the right-wing extremists who control the House failing all of us, choosing publicity over progress, choosing politics over people, and choosing protecting the disgraced and now indicted former president rather than protecting our democracy. Today, at the urging of the former president and his lawyers, the chairman has dragged the entire House Judiciary Committee to New York, inserting the federal government into a purely state and local matter with no credible pretense of jurisdiction. And he's making the American taxpayer, and especially the New Yorkers, who he claims to be so concerned about, making those taxpayers pay for this foolishness. This isn't governance. It's not working for the American people. It's grandstanding. It's a stunt. Just look at all the cameras here. And every second of it is preventing us from being able to do the real work that the people who elected us expect us to do in Congress. To our witnesses here today who've shared their pain and trauma in being victims of crime and violence, I am so sorry for the impact that has had on you and your families. Anyone listening to you has to be moved by what you've experienced. And I applaud your courage in trying to take that pain and move to change things going forward. But I fear that you have been re-victimized by this hearing, because this hearing is not going to provide that change. It's not a serious effort to make our communities safer. Our Republican colleagues aren't in New York City to prevent crime. They're here to protect someone who's been charged with committing crimes. And how do we know that? Look at the time, place, and manner of this hearing. We know that the timing isn't a coincidence, because as soon as it became obvious that the Manhattan District Attorney was getting ready to charge Mr. Trump with crimes, Mr. Trump's lawyers sent a letter to the chairman telling him to use the full powers of Congress to go after the Manhattan DA. We know that the place is important because the choice of place for this hearing isn't a coincidence. It's about protecting Mr. Trump because it's being held in the city where Mr. Trump was indicted and arrested just 2 weeks ago. If this hearing were focused on fighting crime, as several people have mentioned, there are other jurisdictions that have much higher rates of crime. And as to the manner of this hearing, we know that it's about protecting Mr. Trump because it's being led by the disgraced former president's closest allies, the ones who benefit the most if he can beat the criminal charges here in New York, or if they can intimidate the Manhattan DA or the other prosecutors across the country who are investigating other alleged crimes. Crime prevention is a serious topic, and it deserves serious discussion, but that's not what this hearing is about. Instead, we're seeing a circus, a performance by partisan politicians who've hitched their wagons to the Trump train. So I and my colleagues refuse to sit idly by while families across this country, from Alabama to Louisville to Nashville to Uvalde to Buffalo to Boulder, while they're mourning the loss of their loved ones to gun violence. We stand ready to pass legislation to address the serious issues facing all Americans if our Republican colleagues will let us. Now, Ms. Fisher, you and several others have mentioned the iron pipeline, the route through which many of the crime guns in states like New York and Pennsylvania are acquired. Just last year, the ATF intercepted 400 illegal guns from southern states that were being sent to my community in Philadelphia. Can you speak to the impact of lax gun laws in states that lack more specific gun laws, the impact that it has on gun violence is in cities like New York and Pennsylvania, Philadelphia?
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative. Because traffickers are able to easily and illegally obtain guns in states with weak gun laws like Florida or Georgia or the Carolinas. They are able to easily purchase lots of guns and traffic them into neighborhoods that have been disproportionately impacted by structural and systemic inequities for decades. And we're talking about vulnerable communities that are already lacking in access to resources. And because of that, those guns are being used in crimes, and also because gun carrying is more likely when people feel afraid and they're feeling more powerful.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentlelady,
I would just seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a report entitled Uncovering the Truth About Pennsylvania Crime Guns.
without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Texas,
Mr.
Good.
Chairman, I'm sorry. They keep addressing us, the victims who are here to testify and make change.